have a pretty tight schedule, lots of speakers, but I'd like to take a few minutes right now to offer you the chance to ask some questions. The counsel from Brazil, Mr. Herman, he had to leave, but he was very excited about being here and he wants to stay in touch and participate in the future. But if you have any questions you'd like to address to Rachel Brinkley or to Mrs. Segal on what you've heard here today, here's an opportunity. So, are there any questions?
So the innovation that you talked about, the $1. Hi, I'm Saket. I'm also one of the speakers. But I have a question. The innovation you talked about, the $1 innovation, what was the model that actually stood them out from anyone else who was doing that innovation?
That's a great question. The reason that they were able to do it like that is that they realized very early on that the most important thing in a school is not the building but the teacher. So they invested in teacher training. As looks like you're from India, am I right about that? So you do know that otherwise what do they do in these areas, even if there are government schools? First of all, there are no government schools in these areas. But what they do is they bring a teacher from the city. The teacher from the city, it takes 2-3 hours to come to the school. It's not a viable model, even for the best, non-corrupt, wanting to do good work teacher, it's just not a viable model. So what our founders did is that they found the local available best, maybe with a 10th grade education from that general area. And the interview process just tries to see if they have a fire in their belly to make a change in their community. So they train these teachers first in motivation, the first training. So every 6 months they get trained with us. The first training of 10 days is to really impart in them that they can be the change that they want to see in their village. So what we have seen is in our 54,000 villages, about 71% are women. And these women and men, of course, they are called also acharyas. They are not called teachers. So there's a respect that goes with that. And they have become powerful influencers in their community. So the pay that we give is 60% goes to pay the teacher, 30% goes to train the teacher. So if you cut out the infrastructure cost, and really, these children don't live in homes, necessarily pakka homes, as we are calling, good structures. So we might run these in the local panchayat head school, or it might be in the temple or whatever it is. And that really helps us cut the cost. Another thing is that we have really strong buy-in with the community. That is very important. Speaking of Afghanistan, right, that we have a team from Afghanistan looking at our model, because if it is not closely working with the community to make a difference, you cannot run the school. So these are the two very, very unique things about what we are trying to do. So.
Well, no one else has a question just now. Chris?
I wanted to ask you about the 100 new cities. Just how that, are these like completely new cities from scratch, or are they developing areas that already exist but turning them into, get the idea?
Great question. So in India, if you think about India, Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore. So these are the tier 1 cities that we call. So he wants to create such intense infrastructure in tier 2 cities. So the idea is that can we go to the next level of cities and really provide infrastructure, especially in terms of information technology, like have strong internet presence there, have good power. Power is a big problem in many places. So can we make it so that the infrastructure is really, really robust in these second-tier cities? Again, high-speed rail is something that's being thought about quite a bit. I think in fact, one of the first things he did is he went to China and Japan trying to understand what can be the high-speed rail ideas. So the infrastructure in these cities can be very, very powerful, especially with the respects to information technology. So they become smart cities, and thus in general in India, you don't want to think about rural development as bring all the villagers to the city. It's not sustainable. So if we can make these really smart cities, maybe we can outsource some of the work to the villagers, maybe my villages, not my personal villages, but the 54,000 that I'm talking about, but those Ekal villages could get jobs. So those kinds of ideas is what he's trying to bring, so that all, urban slum development problems and all that gets out a little bit. So that is the model that is being thought about. And so the cities are there, and there's quite, thanks to the communication revolution, there is actually quite a bit that is happening in the second-tier cities. Even in my villages, the mobile phone is very, very big. I mean, 2G and 3G, you can find in very, very remote areas. I have people now from some of the villages who are following me on Facebook. I'm really surprised, so they use, and they type sometimes in Hindi itself or their own local language, so that awareness. And Modi, actually, one of his biggest success was using social media very effectively. So I think those kinds of ideas are being used in those things, and he really wants to put it on high gear. The other thing is, in second-tier cities, often you don't have great education, say. So he would like to have satellite communication with the best teachers who like to live in the bigger cities and bring them in to the second tier and hopefully into my villages as well, so that you get the best knowledge and best education possible. I hope I answered your question.
Any other questions? Well, I have one. I have to do some research on this one, I'm not sure, but now we know in the U.S. we have astronauts. The Russians have cosmonauts. The Chinese have taikonauts. Now, what are we going to call the Indian space travelers?
That's a very, very good question. Maybe we should call them the Devas, because those are the ones that are flying around everywhere, right? Devanauts. Why not? No knots. Deva, yes. So I don't know, but yeah, that's an interesting question about what, you're right. I will do my research and see what might fit best. But I guess if you think about astro, whether it is ether, whether it is Akash. Akash is what is the fifth element. So whether we are talking about that, and Mangal, I mean the planets, that's another thing, whether we should take the grahanauts, graha is planets, so travelers to the planets, what that can be, we don't know yet, but I'll let you know. Maybe we can crowdsource the answer, actually.
Tom.
I have a suggestion for her. The Latin, I can speak loud. The Latin for why not is cur non. How about Kerna?
I like that. I will
Kernanauts.
Kernanauts. I will remember that. Why not?
Stephen Hanley, I'm an adult educator. Been working in literacy for over 30 years. Just to let people know, you think of Massachusetts, every block you turn, you can touch a university or a college or an institute of higher learning. Yet, Massachusetts, about almost 7 million people, and many times when they talk about population explosion or desolation, you combine Massachusetts and Rhode Island's population, you have the population of Haiti in the same land territory. And we haven't even developed central or western Massachusetts to where it should be. It stopped developing in the early part of the 20th century. You go to Mount Wachusett, 40 miles outside west of Boston, you just see green. It hasn't really been developed for the people or the villages, as we call towns and cities. And just to share with you, 1.1 million adult Massachusetts residents need English, literacy, from either the kindergarten level all the way up to college preparation, out of a population of close to 7 million. And many of the adults in Massachusetts, I would dare estimate, I don't have the exact number, 1 million to 2 million are from other parts of the world, because this is the brain center. And I think our educational system is in crisis, not so much because of the literacy issues, but the weight and effort and money to program our students for particular outcomes and a way of learning. And your observation of the chart that I wanted to comment was that it costs less for something that was a dream. Who would have ever thought India would be going into outer space? And yet always when you're a child, oh, that costs too much. You're a dreamer. You're a child. You're a dreamer. And this type of cynicism from our previous generation and today, and you see the amount of money for an illusion in Hollywood or Bollywood, the illusion is costing, and it's only a transference of wealth going from many to the hands of the few. And education, the way you described in the villages and the way the LaRouche Pack in the Schiller Institute, is to generate the wealth through an educational system that is spirited in principles of truth, so that we don't spend our money wasting our time on books that don't develop the mind to create and innovate and embrace the spirituality of the different nations and have this type of dialogue in our public square, in our public schools, rather than having a government that excludes this type of thinking, which allows us not to become smart anymore. So I thank you for that.
I wanted to just add a quick comment to that. First of all, actually learning English has been a great demand from my villages. So I would love to, meet up with you and see what methodologies I could use. That could be very helpful. And the second thing I wanted to say is actually, I just got a grant from an Indian American to put education kiosk and lab in India. And I'm experimenting with teaching methods, and I'm very hopeful that I'm going to succeed, at least at this moment. Maybe Modi has built my optimism. But if we do come back, I'd love to keep in touch, because we are also looking at adult literacy, and I would love to keep in touch. And I'm sure if I get those learnings from the villages, I think I feel can benefit the rest of the world as well. I don't think it's just in India that you're exactly right about the thing. And I'll just add this one last thing is about Afghanistan. In fact, the team from Afghanistan came and visited our villages, because that's what they were saying, that a lot of money has gone into Afghanistan to build schools. And so they were giving this example of some people from America went to teach with green eggs and ham as the book. And that doesn't quite work in Afghanistan, right? As you can imagine. And in fact, it took me 2 minutes too, because I think it's a great book, and Dr. Seuss, God bless him, he did a fantastic job. But drugs, when we were talking about, poppy development, it can only be removed if in the villages you can give an alternative method of really growing high value crops or other things. So industrial development is fantastic, and I think it should be done. But at the same time, it is very, very important to have cultural, localized development with micro-rural entrepreneurship in the villages. So I just wanted to bring that up. And in Afghanistan, the team clearly said that was lacking at this moment. So whoever is going in there, it's important to understand that. I also did not understand that. If you can keep those villages developed, terrorism is going to go down quite a bit, as I mentioned before. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to break now. We have a pretty packed schedule for the second part of our conference. So let's break now. And I want to point out, we're mobilizing to get the United States to join the BRICS. There's a literature table in the back where you can get the materials you need for the knowledge to do that, especially the newly released report, The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. That's now available. You can purchase that today. Also, we have the petition that the Schiller Institute is circulating, calling on the United States and Europe to join the BRICS. You should sign. You should get every organization that you belong to endorse and sign and circulate that. We have to build a mass movement in this country to become part of this BRICS process, this community of principle for development. So let's reassemble here at about 3:15 so that we can get everything in that we have to. Thanks.